Welcome back to Mark Hollop's vlog, everyone. Thanks for joining in. And today we're going to talk about something a little different. Obviously, if you're following my channel, there's a good possibility you're a car enthusiast. And so in every car enthusiast life, you find there's that moment, there's that trigger that activates that says, all of a sudden, I feel like, I have this need, this want for cars. I like driving these cars. There's something that triggered your mind or your heart that said, eventually, hey, I need a car now going forward. There's some event, some activation, whether it was a movie you watched or possibly it's a ride in someone's car. Maybe you got exposure to it. Maybe you had a car show, you saw something that so impressed you that you felt, I need to buy one of those. And so I want to talk about that today. And as time goes on the channel, I want to talk more and more of these stories. For me personally, I've had story upon story upon story that keeps reinforcing the fact that I love cars. And truly, it's not just one event for me. Yeah, I have that trigger moment when I was young, for example, and I mentioned about my father and seeing that Countach for the first time on the Alpine poster. That was a trigger to say Lamborghini, but that wasn't the ultimate trigger in saying, hey, I want this car. I need something sporty. I mean, this goes back many, many moons, but I want to talk specifically today about one moment in time. And I have a lot of stories to share with you guys, and I want to talk about one specifically today, and that has to do with the Porsche 930 Turbo. And so a lot of you guys out there are fans of the 911 and fans of the Porsche, and others absolutely despise them. And I can appreciate both ends of the spectrum because on one hand, they're absolutely genuine performance machines. They've got a major history to them. They've been developed for many, many years and just get better every single year. The flip side is they were never designed to be an optimal performance car. I mean, with the engine hanging out the back, they're never really the vehicle that was set out to be, truly the best performance car. Whereas today, they almost are. I mean, if you talk about taking a dedicated, serious track car to the track, most people automatically think default Porsche 911 GT3 or GT3 RS, GT2 RS. Those are the cars that come to mind when you think, yeah, I want to buy a serious track machine or track weapon. But skipping right along, I want to talk about the one major event that I had. So where did my passion for the Porsche 911 come from? Well, let's take this back to the beginning of the time on that. And the storyline begins with something about a Mazda RX-7. I had an 88 Mazda RX-7 with the Wankel engine, and I thought those were great cars. I had a great time in it, 146 horsepower, 5-speed manual gearbox. It was a lot of fun. I literally, I'd go out racing against, I had a cousin that had a Corvette, 1981 Corvette, and I would give him a run for his money. As a matter of fact, out of the hole, I was a little quicker. Of course, the Corvette with the big, the 350 small block, eventually would outpace me. But the fact of the matter is, I always thought the RX-7 was the cat's ass. Then moving on, all of a sudden a friend of mine bought a 911S. He bought a 1976 911S. Most would argue, who know Porsches, would say that's probably one of the worst years. Obviously, you had the magnesium case, you had non-galvanized bodywork, and generally speaking, the cars weren't really that well sorted, so it's not really what you'd consider the best vintage or the best year of the 911, but my friend of mine bought this car. It was older, used, it was a Targa. It wasn't necessarily in the best shape, but it was what it was. It still ran well. It was the essence of the 911, the burning oil, the burning gas smell. Get out of there, it smells rich. So my first experience with that was he picks it up, I go with him, and we go for a ride. And of course, from that ride, we go out ripping around, and then obviously we're cruising around just all over town. A Mustang pulls up next to us, decides he wants to race. My buddy, definitely always game for it. Light turns green, boom, he starts pulling gears, walks away from the Mustang. Mustang dead in the water. Wow, that was actually surprised. I never thought, a flat 6 engine like that would take out, a 5-liter Mustang. Obviously we did. Then along comes, we're cruising on the freeway, and there's a guy in a Harley, looks over, and then he kind of gives it a rev, and then he wants to go. We're already driving, we're cruising along, and he guns it. Buddy here with the 911 starts pulling gears, starts holding with the motorbike. So clearly the car had more oomph than I actually anticipated, and I was actually very, very surprised and excited by that. But moving on to my situation, so I was very impressed. Then I decided I'm going to go out and start looking for a Porsche. I came across a 69 that was converted to a wide body. It was sort of that that baby blue color, absolutely beautiful. But it had a lot of bugs. It needed a lot of things to get worked out. So I bought it. But a friend of mine, actually the same friend, actually his brother decided, hey, you know what? I love that car. I'll buy it off you. So the car was still getting there was some final work happening to it from the person I was buying it from. I drove it a few times, but really I didn't get to really enjoy it because I ended up selling it directly to my other friend. So I bought it, owned it short time, moved it on. Then I started looking around and I ended up coming across a 911 SC Targa. Loved it. It had the Carrera wing on it. It had the upgraded H4 headlights. And of course, it looked great in black, on black interior. The interior was refreshed. They had new leather seats in there. The car looked impeccable. I love that car, man. I'm telling you, I could wash that thing all day, every day. I enjoyed washing it, polishing it. That thing had more wax on it than you can even imagine. I used to get criticized by my parents about, you're going to wash the paint off of it. You're washing it so often. But anyway, moving on. I drove that car for numerous years, and I really thought it was like probably the best Porsche that you could ever dream for. And that was back in I think that goes back to about 95. So clearly that was a long time ago, and this was a 79 911 SC with a 3-liter engine and a whopping 180 horsepower. But it was lots in the day, and it certainly seemed like a lot of fun. So I enjoyed it for numerous years. And then I started getting the hankering. I used to buy those magazines, Excellence magazines. I don't know if any of you guys are aware of those or if you've ever been familiar or kind of flipped through those magazines. But Excellence was a magazine I honestly craved. Every single month, I'd be chasing down to a local cigar shop, actually called Hub Cigar here on White Ave. And for those locals out there that are familiar with Hub Cigar, it's no longer there, but it was there forever. And it was one of those old kind of dive places where it smelled like magazines and cigars, and it had hardwood floorboards that would almost feel like they would sink and cave in under your feet. It was old, antiquated, but it had character. So I loved going there. I'd go there to pick up my latest magazine every single month, Excellence. And reading that magazine got me yearning for the next step. After numerous years with the SC, I decided, you know what? I think I need a 930. Like, I hadn't driven one before, never got exposed to one. I'd seen the odd one out there on the roads. But when you see a 930 with the big fender flares and the whale tail, it just got the blood pumping. It got me extra excited. I love the 911 SC, but when I saw a 930, I really got revved up. So then one day we took a trip. Me and the wife, we were dating at the time. We did a trip to California, and we did a nice little road trip. Actually, we flew into San Francisco, and then we decided to do a road trip down to Los Angeles. And on the way, I pulled up one of those Hemmings Motor News magazines. I'm not sure if you guys are aware of those magazines. It was a great magazine too. You'd flip through, you'd find mega cars, like collectibles, performance, exotics, everything would be in there. Hemmings Motor News, it's sort of that tan-colored, beige-colored, almost like a small phone book, if you will. So I used to flip through there, and I came across a car, and it was a 77 Porsche 930. So the 77, for you guys out there that maybe you know, maybe you don't know, 78 is when they went to the 3.3 liter. They put bigger brakes on it. They put an intercooler on it. And it was just a little better car with a little more output. But some would argue the earlier 3 liters were even better because they were lighter. Sure, they didn't have the intercooler. They were running on less power, smaller brakes. But they were still a 4-speed manual, and they had a lot of power, and they were a lot of fun. Well, I found this car in the Hemmings Motor News, and as we were driving down the interstate, we took the Highway 101 in Southern California. I love that road. Literally one of the best roads to take a performance car. You get so many of the twisties. You've got to take the Pacific Coast side. And we did. So we stayed in some bed and breakfasts, and we cruised along, stayed in some hotels, some shady, some not. But we made our way down to Los Angeles. And before hitting LA, for those of you guys that are aware of it, Santa Barbara, of course, is a little, I would say probably a couple hours north of Los Angeles. So as we were coming, before we hit Los Angeles, we hit Santa Barbara, and it turns out that's where this 930 was for sale. I looked up the number, I called the guy, and lo and behold, he actually answered the phone. I didn't actually expect it. It almost seemed like, something in a magazine like this you'd never get a hold of and actually talk to the person, but I did. So I got the address. Then we checked into a gas station, and I talked to this kid who was like probably 19 years of age, and just, some local. And we talked, and I said, it's really, really nice here. Beautiful, because for those of you, if you've been to Santa Barbara, you can appreciate they're not big on, the franchise McDonald's and the Burger Kings. They're really more ma and pa, and it's a really quaint city. It's beautiful. It's absolutely beautiful. If you've never been there, you've got to check it out. Gorgeous. On the ocean. Really can't beat Santa Barbara. By the way, that's where Michael Jackson lived, in those parts. Maybe even Oprah possibly lives in those areas. But nonetheless, he gave me directions. We got a chuckle too, because he asked where I was from, and I said, well, Canada, and he asked about snow, and of course I shared with him the fact that we probably get 6 or 7 months of the year where we have snow, and I asked about here, and he said, oh yeah, way back, my parents told me way back in 1968 we had a snowfall, but we really haven't seen any in my time, he said. And I thought that was just humorous. We chuckled. Anyway, I set up, found the address, called the guy, and we pulled up and I checked this car out, and it was absolutely gorgeous. It definitely did not disappoint. It was that, I don't even know if it was a factory color. It was a very minty looking green. And for those, again, maybe drop in the comment section below if any of you guys know the actual Porsche color, if in fact you're familiar with that. But it was sort of a really minty green color. Beautiful. In the 70s, everything was sort of like, shag carpet and odd colors, like really kind of almost odd, some would, say tacky colors, really, for the most part. But the outside was gorgeous. It was sort of a minty green, very light and, very, very bright and light and gorgeous exterior color, I thought. I loved it. Inside was a heavier shag of carpet. Not something you find in today's cars, by the way. But it was a dark green. Well, dark green, or I want to say there's parts like maybe two-tone. I think it was dark green and it had tobacco. So we talked about it for a while. And the owner, he said, well, do you want to go for a ride? And I said, absolutely. I've come a long ways. I'd love to see the car, or at least go for a ride. I didn't need to drive it, and I didn't drive it. But so he fires it up. We let it run and warm up for a minute or two. And then we set out and we're cruising through the neighborhood. And then basically we find an on-ramp to the freeway. And this is where it all changed for me. This is where the trigger hits for me, where I decided, I needed something more than the SC. So as we're merging onto the freeway, he says, hold on. And he just unleashes first, second. And we're actually getting some wheel spin under full acceleration. I'm like, whoa! And absolutely blown away by the performance. Now, by today's standards, a Golf GTI would probably keep up with it. Or definitely a Golf R. But that's not the point. The car was loud and raucous and aggressive. And, it kind of get a little loose in the back. And it was just everything. You could hear the turbo screaming, and honestly, it blew my mind. It absolutely took me to a new level. I was elevated to cloud 9. No, wait a minute. Elevated to cloud 22. Really, it was just nothing short of breathtaking for me. I couldn't stop talking about this shit. So we get, I thanked the guy. We kind of shared, exchanged, all the goodness, and said, okay, well, I'll think about it. I got to go back to Canada. The whole importation thing is a pain in the ass. So I kind of had to go back and think about it and see how the finances would work. But I really needed to sell the SC first, which I still owned. So it was going to be a bit of an uphill battle to get that done, the transaction finished. Nonetheless, it absolutely blew my mind. So once we walked away from this individual, this private seller, talking my wife's ears off. At that time, girlfriend's ears. Just could not say enough about it. I knew right from that moment I had to get home, sell my SC as quickly as I could, and then move myself into a 930. Now, whether it was this green one or whether it was something here locally. But of course, as time went on, the SC took time to sell. Back in the day, you couldn't just flip a car. It didn't sell very easily. I posted it on every website you can imagine, from Auto Trader. They didn't have Kijiji at the time, but I tried posting it everywhere. I think I had it on eBay maybe. I don't even remember if eBay was a thing, but I had it on every classified site that I could, and I didn't get a lot of action on it. Eventually, I finally did. It took probably a year and a half to actually sell the SC. By that time, pretty much gave up on the green one that I found in Santa Barbara. But at that point as well, I learned something new, because reading the Excellence magazines, I educated myself, and I decided I wanted a later car. So a car that had the intercooler, a car with the bigger brakes, and the 3.3 liter engine versus the old 3 liter. So I kind of figured out that, I kind of had a shifting gears, pardon the pun, and I decided to look for something a little bit more at that time more modern, if you will, but certainly something more upgraded. And so I started down that train. Now I called and I'd be watching, and there was very few cars, but back in the day it was difficult to look across Canada. I didn't feel like driving down east. Most of the time you didn't want to buy a car from down east because everybody knows it's kind of salt haven down there, and anything down there typically rots out and rusts. So I tried to keep my searches for kind of Western Canada, more specifically Alberta, because a trip to Calgary is only a 3-hour trip away from here, so it would be easy. So I did some looking around. I found a few cars, I looked at a couple. Most of the time they were disappointing, not for what it was, but for the condition of it. And I didn't want something, that showed cosmetically poor. I wanted something that looked maybe original, maybe a slight amount of patina, but I wanted something that was clean and original and looked good to show. You don't want to drive these cars and have them look beat to the street. In my opinion, they've got to be presentable. Now, you want to use them, sure, but you want to make sure that, you're picking up something that is, you're not ashamed to point and show, hey, that's my car. So anyway, I looked around, and then I stumbled across this one that I've been kicking tires for a while. I didn't actually go look at it because I called about it once, and when I first time I talked to the guy, he said it had some road rash on the rocker panels, just from rocks. How the flares at the bottom come out quite aggressively. Well, the front, tires blow all that rock against the rockers. And so you've got the shark fins on the flares, so it protects most of the fender flare, but the actual rockers were pretty beat up. And then he explained that to me. And so when I first talked to him, when I heard about that, I kind of dismissed it. But as the summer went on and I was struggling to find a car, I decided to call him back, and I said, you know what, I'm going to come take a look at it. So we drove down to Calgary, and this guy was in Calgary, coincidentally. His name was Jim, great guy. Turns out he's really into racing and tuning and all this kind of good stuff. But anyway, went down and looked at it, and the car was impeccably clean otherwise. Yeah, there was a little rash on the rockers. But I'm looking at this, and I'm like, well, wait a minute. We can work with that, because all you got to do is unbolt. On those cars, it's very easy to unbolt the rockers. I took that off. I got a color match for the paint. Went down to a paint shop here, and they colored it up. They matched up the color. We got a brew mixed up, and we took those rockers into one of the best body shops here in the city, here in Edmonton, and I basically said, here, repaint them, rock protect them, make them good. So they did that. They looked absolutely flawless. I can't say enough about the great work that they did. I bolted them on, and the car looks super clean after that. The car also had some other upgrades. The upgraded third brake light. It also had the Carrera front spoiler, or the valence on it. So there were some upgrades on it. The H4 headlights. A lot of nice little details on it. It was done up very, very nicely. So I'm like, this is the car. So I took it in for a pre-purchase inspection, only to find out there were some unfortunate parts to it. Now, it had some leaks, not compression leaks, but it definitely has some oil leaks, oil return tubes. I think the thermostat leak. There were some oil leaks for sure. And there were some other things. The antenna didn't work, and one of the power mirrors was kind of loose, wasn't working that well. So there was a few odds and sods. The car clearly wasn't showroom. It was very, very clean. But after that, I talked to the guy, the previous owner, Jim, and we chatted about it, and I ended up, kind of negotiating based on some of the repairs. I told him, to get rid of some of these leaks, because I think there was a cam housing leak on there too. So I said, you know what, I'm going to have to spend some money here. Clearly, I don't know. I don't know what that looks like. I did a ballpark on, the estimate of, what the dealer was suggesting that were the problems, because they're the ones that did the PPI. Then I said, look, he was asking this. I kind of deducted some of what I perceived as some of the expenses, and I deducted off the top, made a deal, he accepted, and Bob's your uncle. And I never looked back, and that car was absolutely amazing. Now, with that said, time goes on, I drove it hard. It had adjustable boost. We realized later on, after several years, I ran a leak down test on it. It failed. Didn't look very good that way. So it was time to do a tear down. So we, after about, it was 5 years of owning the car, 4 or 5 years, I decided to do a full engine rebuild. Took it into my buddy Ed. We stripped it down. We actually split case and realized, oh, wait a minute, oil pumps corroded. We had cracked piston rings, and we had a lot of other internal issues once we start splitting the engine apart. Then we decided injector blocks. We decided to do cam upgrades, and we basically upgraded a bunch of internals, externals, ARP hardware. We did a lot of updates on it, and we built it right, put a new clutch in it, and it was set to go. And then I sold it to a local guy here after probably owning the car for, I can't remember, it must have been 8 or 9 years. No, it was more than that. It was after owning the car for about 12 or 13 years, I finally sold it because after I got a taste of the Italian connection there with the Gallardo at Ed's shop, coincidentally, I eventually felt that, yeah, that was kind of the next step. But I've never looked away. The Porsche 911 has always been near and dear to my heart because I've owned a few of them. And quite frankly, every time I see one drive by, it sort of like gets the blood kind of pumping a little bit again. Every single time. Personally, for me right now, I love the 992. I actually love the 991 better for the most part, but there are, parts of the 992 I've considered maybe looking at. I love the car. Looks extremely aggressive, even in like a 4S configuration, but absolutely amazing cars. Would I go to another 911? Yeah, it's very, very, very much a possibility, but we'll see. Time goes on. So I just wanted to share that story, how I came about, the 911 world, what it means to me. It's a big deal. I think they make superb, impeccable cars. And I just want to hear from you guys. If you drop a line below, I'd love to hear it. Any cars that made like absolute next level, like connected with you, at another level that, not just seeing a cool car, see the new Mustang drive by and you're like, oh, that looks kind of neat. No, I mean, really connected with you in another level. I mean, this one clearly did. And it really stuck with me for years. It left a major imprint, for me, and it just kept me the 911 has always been one of those that have been near and dear to my heart. So I hope that helps with you guys. I just wanted to share a story. I'm going to share more of these types of stories because I have so many stories, and some of them are like this, and some of them are drives, some of them are near-death experiences, but I want to share some of these stories with you guys. I'm sure you'll find some of them interesting. And at the very least, I'd love to hear from you guys. Drop a note in below and, share with me if there's anything like that is, really connected with you on another level. So maybe biblical perhaps. Anyhow, with all of that said, great to talk to you guys again. I hope to see you real soon. Catch you then. Bye-bye.